Next, let's talk about harsh ride. Now, this is a pretty common issue on especially the gas coaches with leaf springs, such as the F53 chassis. And how we test is pretty straightforward. The coach rides stiff. So you're going to feel every crack in the road, every rut, every little bump. And this is going to be obvious as both a driver and a passenger. So one of the first things we look at for harsh ride is what is the tire pressure set to. So if you're running too high of a tire pressure, then you can get an excessively harsh ride. So again, you got to weigh your coach, got to determine what pressure you actually need to run for the weight that you are carrying. And again, here's our example tire inflation chart. So even 5 psi difference can make a difference perceptibly in how soft a coach rides. So especially if you were to have your coach weighed and find that, I've actually got a 10 psi or 15 psi margin, maybe I drop it down by 10 psi, that can make a nice difference in terms of ride quality. Additionally, if you're running a really light load, so you can compare your actual weights versus what your front and rear axles are rated to. So if you're running really light compared to the actual gross axle weight rating, in this case here, the front GAWR is 9,000 pounds. The rear GAWR is 15,500 pounds for a combined gross vehicle weight rating, GVWR, of 24,000 pounds. So if you are, say, 2,000 pounds under your front GAWR, then you are likely going to be riding pretty stiff because you just need a bit more mass over that axle to really absorb those impacts and bumps from the road and get the springs and a little more where they're designed to run. And then it is also worth noting that the lower gross vehicle weight rating coaches with a shorter wheelbase do tend to have a harsher ride compared to the longer and heavier ones for the same chassis. The F53 is a good example where this particular snapshot is from a 24,000 pound GVWR coach. They make these all the way down to a 16,000 pound GVWR coach. Now, the springs are rated differently for the weight because you are carrying quite a bit less weight. But just because of the lower mass and also just the shorter wheelbase, you're sitting much closer to that rear axle. You're going to pick up quite a bit more harshness, especially coming off of that rear axle sitting closer to it. If ride quality is important to you, then we generally recommend not going with the shortest, smallest model of a given chassis. Ride height is also a factor to look at if you're dealing with harsh ride. So you'd want to check your ride height, make sure it's in spec. You want to see, is the coach bottomed out, or is the ride height excessively tall, which would indicate that the springs may be too stiff for the weight that you're carrying. And with our air ride example here, is your ride height within spec? Then looking at the springs themselves, so if you do have leaf springs on the coach, are they running in a reverse arch? Here's an example from the back of a Sprinter 3500. So note that this is typical on many chassis, but they also do tend to have more of a problem with ride harshness. So as I mentioned, this is the back of a Sprinter 3500 dually. Those do tend to have a bit more harshness coming off the rear suspension. They ride great on the front, but a little bit stiff in the rear. The Ford E350 and E450 are similar, just even more so. So the E450 rear leaf springs use a pretty tall pack, and they always run out of reverse arch, and they also tend to ride pretty harsh in the back. So how do we fix this? Well, either helper springs to try to restore some arch to the spring pack, or an aftermarket spring pack can improve the ride in this case. Now for shocks, we have talked about shocks a bit here and there already in terms of sway control, bounce, porpoising, but I do want to get into a little bit more detail this time. There are quite a few shocks out there that may provide decent handling, but they may be at the cost of a stiffer ride. So if you run a really strong shock, that may make it handle great, but if you're feeling every little bump and imperfection on the road, then it's kind of not worth it. So in our experience, we have found that the Koni shocks do provide really the best balance that we have found for control and handling, especially with their FSD or frequency selective damping technology. So compared to some other offerings out there, Konis tend to be stronger in rebound and softer in compression. And what this allows is for the axle to move upward initially, so that would be compressing the shock. So allow that movement to happen more freely, but then control the movement afterwards, so be stronger in rebound. So here's a snapshot showing the Evo series, which is Koni's larger bore offering. And then they also have their smaller diameter FSD, or frequency selective damping technology shock. So both are very good options. Many of the new Evo offerings are also incorporating the FSD technology. Then finally, if you want the best ride possible on a gas leaf sprung coach, then you really can't go any better than LiquidSpring. So LiquidSpring actually provides a complete kit where you totally replace your springs with compressible fluid struts. So these are kind of a combined spring and shock absorber all integrated into one. It's all computer controlled. Very impressive system, very impressive ride quality. If you have the budget, then you'll definitely be happy with the way it drives afterward.